The war in Ukraine has become the most intense drone battlefield in human history. In 2025 alone, Russia launched more than 1,000 Shahed drones per week against Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. Ukraine countered with cheap quadcopters and even long-range drones of its own. This created a mathematical conundrum for commanders and tacticians on both sides. How do you justify launching a multi-million-dollar interceptor to destroy a $50,000 drone? Meanwhile, existing anti-air systems were stretched thin across the 860 or so miles of the front line, as they needed to cover a huge swathe of land that went dozens of miles in either direction. But in the 4 years of the war, Ukraine has managed to create innovative solutions to this math problem. And if the early reports are accurate, the latest might just be the most elegant answer Ukraine has found yet to the drone problem: a laser weapon called Sunray. On February 10, 2026, The Atlantic published a report describing a field demonstration of a weapon that Ukrainian soldiers and engineers have spent 2 years quietly building. Then exactly 1 month later, on March 10, Ukrainian journalist Andriy Saplyenko released combat footage that appeared to show an unusual weapon being used against a real Russian target in the field. The weapon, which used directed energy, could apparently cut the fiber optic cable which was tethering a Russian drone to its operator and make it lose control without a single shot being fired. That footage, ironically recorded by a Russian military drone, showed a beam that looked like a glowing sphere hovering in the air, although that image was mostly due to the camera angle and light reflection. Still, to some it looked like something straight out of science fiction, but in reality, it was a relatively simple yet powerful directed laser beam. So, let's dive into the promising new weapon with what we know and what we can infer from the footage and data. Sunray is technically the third publicly confirmed laser weapon Ukraine has developed since the start of the full-scale invasion in February 2022. The first was Trizub, the Ukrainian word for trident, which the country's unmanned systems forces confirmed in early 2025 was capable of striking aerial targets at altitudes above 2 kilometers. The second was Slimby, a system whose technical specifications were also shared publicly by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry when it was introduced. Both of those programs were disclosed with relatively generous details, including power output and effective range. But by contrast, Sunray's revelation had practically no fanfare, and most of its information remained classified. There are no actual numbers on its maximum power, declared maximum range, or actual performance data in the field. That lack of information is significant, and we'll come back to why it matters. What's been disclosed is the physical form of the weapon, and it's far from the usual picture of a laser-like energy weapon you might see in movies. There is no towering apparatus, no truck-sized generator, no team of technicians in a hardened bunker monitoring glowing consoles. According to the weapon's description in The Atlantic, Sunray resembles a hobbyist telescope with a pair of cameras mounted on its sides. The entire system fits comfortably in the trunk of a standard car. During the demonstration, it was operated from the hood of a pickup truck. When the weapon was fired, or at least when the order to do so was given, the drone hovering a few hundred yards away began to burn and fell from the sky in a fiery arc within seconds. The weapon itself was practically silent and inert, with no ammunition to use. That last detail is worth noting because it goes to the heart of why laser weapons are generating so much interest as Ukraine looks for ways to survive the drone age. A missile intercept costs money every single time the trigger is pulled. Each interceptor in itself is a small missile that needs to be manufactured, procured, and tested. This previously created a natural bottleneck on how much Ukraine could spend on anti-drone warfare that wasn't purely electronic or drone-based in nature. Essentially, apart from using drones themselves, Ukraine would need to resort to trying to dismantle the networks that kept the drones connected to their operator. And with the fiber optics drones that we began seeing as early as 2024, that became practically impossible if you couldn't sever the physical connection. But with a laser weapon such as the Sunray, as long as it has electrical power, it can keep firing at nearly zero cost per shot. In the same amount of time it would take to deploy a Patriot interceptor, a laser system could theoretically have engaged hundreds of targets. And the Patriot missile itself costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and is only useful against aircraft or high-yield cruise missiles that Russia isn't really sending into Ukraine. That economic math is extraordinarily attractive in a conflict defined by industrial attrition. Now, if the description of a silent, invisible beam that ignites drones within seconds sounds familiar, that's because it should. Star Trek introduced audiences to the concept of directed energy weapons in the 1960s. The crew of the USS Enterprise used phasers, which shot beams of focused energy that could stun, disable, or disintegrate targets on command. Later, Star Wars gave us turbo lasers, planetary defense cannons, and the Death Star's directed energy weapon, large enough to vaporize an entire planet. The genre has spent 6 decades imagining weapons that kill with light rather than lead. Of course, Sunray is far from the capabilities of the Death Star or even a phaser capable of destroying a hardened metal hull or a tank. But the underlying concept, where you concentrate enough energy on a small enough point to heat up and destroy a small target, has been in the works for decades. All Sunray needs to do is overheat a small drone's electronics or burn through its thin carbon fiber frame at a few hundred yards. The physics behind the sci-fi weapon and the real-life one only differ in terms of scale, but that small scale is precisely what Ukraine needs when it's up against drone swarms daily. To understand what the demonstrated capability means in practice, consider the video from February. A small drone was launched and flew to a distance of a few hundred yards. The system tracked it autonomously, its cameras locking onto the target. Seconds after the operator commanded it to fire, the drone simply ignited and fell. The footage from March adds a different dimension. In that case, the weapons appear to have targeted not the drone itself, but the fiber optic cable connecting the drone to its operator on the ground. Severing that connection doesn't destroy the drone itself. The drone doesn't explode, it simply loses power and connection and drops. This in some respects, a more elegant kill than burning through the airframe. The target is neutralized silently, with no collateral risk from burning debris, and the only thing destroyed is a cable that's already an environmental issue. Of course, it takes a bit of a leap to go from these two highly controlled scenarios to the actual battlefield environment, but the overall principle behind its usefulness is sound. Russian forces have increasingly deployed what they call waiting drones, UAVs that hover or loiter near the front line, tethered to long fiber optic cables that carry signals back to the operator, bypassing GPS entirely and resisting electronic jamming. These systems have become a growing problem for Ukrainian forces because conventional jamming and GPS spoofing, which work against Shaheds and commercial quadcopters, simply don't work against a drone being piloted directly through a physical wire. A laser that can target that cable and burn through it in seconds offers a solution to a problem that no existing system handles as cleanly. At the shorter end of the threat spectrum, small commercial quadcopters modified to drop grenades or carry shape-charged warheads have been one of the defining tactical weapons of the war, terrorizing infantry positions across the front. These drones are cheap, numerous, and difficult to shoot down with conventional weapons. A point defense laser that can silently burn one out of the sky within seconds of detection without producing a sound that reveals the position of the operator without expending any ammunition represents a compelling tool at the company or battalion level. Position it on a vehicle, power it from a generator, and let the AI tracking system do the work. Every small FPV drone that approaches the defensive line becomes a potential engagement, and every engagement costs essentially nothing. Now for the numbers, because the numbers are where Sunray's story becomes genuinely remarkable. The report suggests Sunray has been approximately 2 years in development, with some estimates that the prototype cost a few $1,000,000. The projected unit cost for a production model sits at several $100,000. The closest comparison we have is the US Navy's Helios system, which stands for High Energy Laser with Integrated Optical Dazzler and Surveillance. Helios was developed by Lockheed Martin under a contract signed in 2018 worth $150 million. And that's the cost of the development contract alone, not the per-unit cost of fielding the system across a fleet. Some analyses of the full Helios program, including options and follow-on work, put the potential total closer to $1 billion. The American system is genuinely impressive and operates at power levels that Ukraine's prototype almost certainly can't match. But for the specific mission Ukraine needs to accomplish, such as knocking small drones out of the sky near the front line, the Ukrainian system is likely much more cost-effective. That cost calculus becomes even more striking when you place Sunray next to the broader 2025 landscape of high-energy laser weapons developed in the West. Germany's Rheinmetall and MBDA have been developing a shipboard laser demonstrator since at least 2019. As of early 2026, that program had completed a year of sea trials and more than 100 live-fire tests. Yet its budget committee was already raising alarms about a projected cost of €462 million, roughly $548 million at current exchange rates, just for the demonstrator phase. Meanwhile, the Australian company Electro-Optic Systems offers its 100-kilowatt Apollo laser weapon, which secured the first known export contract for a laser system of its kind last August, with the Netherlands as the buyer. These are mature, powerful systems built to the demanding standards of Western procurement programs, with reliability, interoperability, and longevity requirements that add significantly to their cost and development timelines. Now, if you want to check out some of the Western systems, make sure to subscribe to The Military Show. We post daily videos that cover all major advancements in military tech. Instead, Ukraine's Sunray is carving out a unique niche: cheap weapons that can be fielded in large numbers, that can be constructed quickly in wartime conditions, and are effective against the specific drone threats that are killing soldiers on the front line. If Ukraine can eventually produce Sunray at scale, and that's a substantial if, the strategic implications can be significant. Modern air defense in Ukraine is built around layers. Long-range systems like the Patriot handle ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. Medium-range systems handle strikes at intermediate distances. And at the short end, infantry teams with machine guns, electronic warfare kits, and improvised drone-catching nets handle the swarm threat that bleeds through everything else. Sunray could sit inside that short-range layer as a silent, ammunition-free point defense asset that doesn't deplete the missile stocks Ukraine is always scrambling to resupply. A production model priced at a few $100,000 can make the weapon available for widespread field deployment across brigade and battalion positions. Even at moderate quantities, a network of Sunray units distributed along the contact line would represent a meaningful uptick in Ukraine's close-range drone defenses, and it would do so without adding to the interceptor bill, which has been one of the dominant financial pressures of the war. The development trajectory of Sunray is also a bit unique. It illustrates a pattern that's appeared repeatedly in Ukraine's wartime innovation story. The program reportedly began roughly 2 years before the February 2026 public disclosure. That timeline places its origins in early 2024, a period when Russia was dramatically intensifying its Shahed campaigns and Ukrainian air defense reserves were already under severe strain. The engineers who built Sunray didn't have the luxury of a multi-year development phase, a manufacturing bidding process, rounds of congressional authorization discussions, or a decade of testing. They identified a need, started building, and kept iterating until they had something capable enough to demonstrate to a journalist from one of the world's most prominent publications. Compare that to how similar directed energy programs have proceeded in the West. The US Navy's laser weapon development effort, in various forms, has been running for well over 2 decades. Germany's shipboard laser demonstrator has been in development for at least 6 years and has still not reached operational deployment. The UK's Dragonfire program, which successfully demonstrated its own laser weapon in a series of 2024 tests, has been in development since 2017. The West has much slower defense procurement systems designed to minimize risk, ensure interoperability across complex aligned structures, and deliver weapons that will remain in service for 30 years. But that's practically incompatible with the tempo at which the drone threat is evolving in Ukraine. By the time a Western directed energy weapon completes its standard development cycle, Russian drone engineers will have introduced 2 or 3 generations of design improvements. Ukraine cannot afford to wait for perfection. It needs good enough now, in sufficient numbers to matter. This is precisely the culture that produced some of the major advancements in Ukraine and allowed it to survive against a major numerical disadvantage. Ukraine's wartime defense industry doesn't optimize for longevity, interoperability, or the comfort of procurement officers. It optimizes for getting something functional onto the battlefield before the next wave of Shaheds arrives. That said, there are some possible issues with the system. The demonstration showed a small drone being destroyed at a range of a few hundred yards, and the March footage suggested cable-cutting capability at a similar range. But neither of these provides the data needed to answer the questions that actually matter for air defense planning. What is the system's maximum effective range? What power class does it operate at? How does it perform in fog, rain, dust or smoke? All of which are constants on a Ukrainian battlefield. How quickly can it track and engage a fast-moving target compared to a hovering drone? The RAND Corporation, in a report published in December 2025, characterized the directed energy weapons as relatively immature and not currently a viable option. The cited limitations are exactly what you would expect: significant power and infrastructure requirements, inability to engage targets beyond line of sight, and heavy dependence on clear atmospheric conditions. Laser energy is also dispersed by water vapor, dust and aerosols. During testing, the system might perform brilliantly, but those tests are usually done under clear skies or with limited adverse weather simulations. In a real-life scenario, it's hard to tell how it will actually behave. Then there's the fundamental ceiling imposed by the physics of power density. Shooting down a small hovering quadcopter at a few hundred yards requires a certain amount of energy concentrated on a small target for a brief window of time. Shooting down a Shahed 136 cruising at 110 miles per hour from nearly a mile away requires more energy, more precise tracking, and a longer dwell time on target. Currently, it seems that there's no feasible way that Sunray will ever achieve that, so Ukraine would likely deploy it only against small UAVs at short distances. But this is not a minor caveat. Shaheds are the weapon that has done the most cumulative damage to Ukrainian infrastructure, civilian life, and energy systems. They're the drones that have plunged Ukrainian cities into darkness in the middle of winter, that have destroyed power plants and substations, that have killed civilians sleeping in their homes. If Sunray cannot engage Shaheds, it's not Ukraine's Iron Dome. It will be a specific point defense tool for short-range drone threats, and a potentially important one, but ultimately only one component in a layered system rather than the system's centerpiece. That layered system is very much what Ukrainian officials describe when they talk about the direction of the country's air defense development. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has reportedly tasked Pavlo Yelizarov, the newly appointed deputy commander of the Air Force, with assembling an integrated national dome over critical infrastructure by summer 2026. A timeline that insiders acknowledge is extremely compressed. That dome, as conceived, would combine Sunray-type laser systems to be used at close range with the CDIS autonomous interceptor drone system from C and Naudi, which launches interceptors vertically and guides them to targets using onboard cameras and AI. In addition, the P-1 Sun from Skyfall is a reusable interceptor drone that's already accumulated a combat record of over 1,000 kills. The limited number of Western missiles, Patriots, NASAMs, Iris-Ts, are preserved for the hardest targets: ballistic missiles, advanced cruise missiles, the threats that no drone interceptor and no short-range laser can handle. Everything cheaper than that gets handled by the cheaper layer. But there are still a few major questions to answer. The missing technical specifications, such as the power output, the range, and the weather performance, are all important factors that will determine how useful the weapon is. Only with those numbers will analysts be able to make an honest assessment of how many Sunrays Ukraine would need to meaningfully affect the drone threat it faces and what it would cost to reach that threshold. Until then, Sunray remains a very promising experiment that's cleared important hurdles rather than solved a problem. But apart from those issues, it's clear that Ukraine has demonstrated again and again throughout this war that they have the capacity to close technological distances that would have seemed insurmountable 5 years ago, faster than anyone expected, and at fractions of the cost that comparable Western programs require. 2 years from concept to field demonstration, a few $1 million for a prototype, a few $100,000 per unit at production scale. A system that can silently destroy a small drone in seconds without firing a single piece of ammunition or leaving any signature that tells the enemy the location of the operator. In a war defined by the accumulation of small advantages and the grinding mathematics of attrition, that might be the beginning of something considerably larger. Thanks for watching. Now, if you want to understand the broader air defense architecture Ukraine is building around systems like Sunray, check this video on Ukraine's defenses. And finally, make sure to subscribe to the Military Show for daily coverage of the weapons, strategies, and decisions defining global warfare.